Thank you to everybody that's joined us today for this session of the North Central Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Center webinar series presented to you by the National AgrAbility Project. My name is Paul Jones. I manage the National AgrAbility Project, which is headquartered at Purdue University. And our topic today is farm youth and stress. We have two presenters today, Josie Rudolphi from the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign and Jana Davidson from the Progressive Agriculture Foundation. A little background on the USDA NIFA Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Network, commonly known as FARSAN. It was first authorized under the 2008 Farm Bill, and its purpose is to establish stress assistance programs to help people that are engaged in agriculture-related occupations. There are 4 regional FARSAN centers across the United States, covering every state and territory. And if you would like some basic contact information about those centers, you can go to agrability.info/FARSAN. For those not familiar with AgrAbility, we're also sponsored by the USDA's National Institute of Food and Agriculture, and our focus is on helping people in agriculture that have some type of disability or functional limitation. Currently, there are 21 AgrAbility projects around the country. Each one of them partners a land-grant university with at least one nonprofit disability services organization. There's also one National AgrAbility project. Again, that's here at Purdue University through the Breaking New Ground Resource Center. And our partners on that grant include Goodwill of the Finger Lakes, Osteoarthritis Action Alliance, AgriSafe Network, Colorado State University, and Washington State University. For more information about AgrAbility, you can go to agrability.org, and we also have approximately 150 archived webinars that you can view at your convenience on the site. Again, we are very happy to have two presenters today. Our first presenter is Josie Rudolphi, and she is an assistant professor and extension specialist in the Department of Agricultural and Biological Engineering at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. Rudolphi's research quantifies the burden of mental health conditions among agricultural populations, identifies risk and protective factors, and considers socio-ecological interventions. She co-directs the North Central Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Center, a 12-state collaborative that increases and expands stress and mental health services to agricultural producers, workers, and their families. Our second presenter, Jana Davidson, is program manager of the Progressive Agricultural Foundation and leads the foundation's programs team in overseeing day-to-day and long-range program operations, while continuing to strengthen the overall reach, impact, and outcomes of the Progressive Agriculture Safety Day programs. She guides the program staff through ongoing efforts to reach more children, families, and communities throughout North America to best align with the ongoing needs in rural and farming landscapes. Davidson received her Bachelor of Science degree from the Pennsylvania State University in Agribusiness Management and went on to earn a Master of Education degree specializing in teaching and curriculum. She's been a volunteer with the PAF Safety Day program since 2005 and continues to coordinate a PAF Safety Day in her local community. At this time, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn things over to Dr. Rudolphi for her presentation.
Right. Thank you so much, Paul, for the introduction. Thank you all for being here today. I'm excited you all took a little time out of your day to hear about some research we're doing around farm youth and some resources that are available in the farm youth stress space. So as Paul mentioned, I'm Josie Rudolphi. I'm faculty at the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign. I am presenting results from a project that I have. I'm actually going to go to the next slide. That's funded by the National Children's Center for Rural and Agricultural Health and Safety as part of a NIOSH Ag Center grant. This is a project that we're really excited about. We are currently in our third year of recruiting, and I'm going to talk about what that means and how y'all could maybe get involved if you're interested. I really want to acknowledge, of course, our funding center, but also my co-authors or co-presenters, though they're not here today. Dick Berg is from the Marshfield Clinic Research Institute, and Monica McConkey is from Eyes on the Horizon Counseling. So there's a little bit of background to our project, which we call FAM, which means Farm, Adolescent, and Adult Mental Health. It's very important if you're going to have a good research project that you have a great acronym, and we really feel like we do. So it's probably not news to you. This is not new information to many anymore, that agriculture is a uniquely stressful industry. Excuse me. When we think about agricultural work, we are highly susceptible to sudden and unfavorable changes in weather. Similarly, sudden and unfavorable changes to markets or the economy. We know that this work is nonstop. It's all consuming. Producers face a lot of time pressures. We also know that as romantic as the idea can be about working with family members, working several generations in the workplace, we do know that that does cause strain and stress for some people in that space. We have spent, there's a lot of growing body of research out there that many people have contributed to that suggest agricultural producers have worse mental health than the general population. And that's typically marked by higher prevalence of anxiety, depression, and in some populations, higher suicide risk. We are so appreciative that USDA and others have acknowledged farm stress and mental health as a growing concern and are funding research efforts and initiatives to help farmers, to help meet the mental health crisis of farmers. But we do acknowledge that the farm is not only a place where people work, but it's a place where people live. And some of these people are quite small. We know that there's about 2 million people, young people, living and working on farms. We call these farm youth or farm children. They're participating in agricultural work. They're often exposed to the same sorts of elements or production realities as their adult counterparts. Unfortunately, we just don't have the same body of research and resources that we have for adult producers. So that's what really inspired this project, and sort of questioning and being curious about how farm stress is shared by family members, specifically adolescents and adults in the space. So this project is guided by the family stress model. And if you have heard me talk about this project at all, you have heard me mention the family stress model. I really appreciate this model. It was developed out of Iowa, which I'm a huge fan of, right after the 1980s farm crisis. And this model would basically suggest that family economic hardship or poverty affects the quality in which parents are able to not only parent, but have relationships within parent groups. And all of these things can then impact children's emotional and behavioral well-being. So we might often observe poor economic outcomes influencing a parent's emotional health, changes the way they are able to parent, changes the way they have a relationship with perhaps the other parent in the household. And all of these things then have influence on, again, child's internalizing or externalizing behaviors. So we decided to employ this farm stress model to try to examine the relationship between economic stress, sort of family cohesion, and child well-being. So getting into a little bit into the methods, we recruited farm families to participate in an online survey. So it's really important that I say we are presenting 2 years worth of data, and they are not 2 years of the same people. So this is not longitudinal data, excuse me. These are 2 unique samples. We recruited by mail, by email, newsletters, social media. Basically, if somebody was willing to mention our survey, we offered them information and a link to it. In order to meet the criteria to participate, a family had to agree to at least have 1 adult participate and 1 adolescent between the ages of 13 and 17. We administered the survey via REDCap, which allowed us to capture parental consent, youth assent, adult consent to link these surveys together and sort of release them once we received the appropriate consent documents. So if you're a survey aficionado, I would love to talk to you about this process. It's quite complicated, but if you know REDCap, you know that it's a relatively sophisticated system. Here's some information that was on the adult survey and then the adolescent survey. As you can see, very similar. On the adult survey, we collected demographics, of course, but also a lot of those farm characteristics. And that's where we collected all of our economic measures. So we asked parents about their ability to make ends meet, whether they've experienced any financial changes, negative or positive, in the last year. We call those like cutbacks or other sorts of like I said, economic changes. We asked about partner cohesion using a validated instrument that we actually got from the original authors of this model. We asked about social support, health. We again screened for anxiety and depression. And then in the first 2 years, we asked about the COVID-19 experience for the adult. Similarly, on the adolescent survey, we asked about demographic characteristics, their engagement in farm work. We asked about their stress, general health, again, screened for anxiety and depression, asked them to report on their parenting style, asked about various risk-taking behaviors like alcohol use, other sorts of substance use, risky motor vehicle use, etc. And again, their COVID-19 experience in the first 2 years. Here you can see where all of these sort of survey components map to the latent variables within the family stress model. And this is some of them, but not all. This is a long survey. I think if you look at variables wide, it's close to like 706 right now. In the first 2 years, we had pretty good, what I would say, geographic distribution of respondents. Not surprising, a lot from Illinois. So I was able to work through my extension networks to distribute the survey link via email, newsletters, etc. So you can see we have a lot of representation from the Midwest. I'm going to get into the results now. I'm going to talk pretty generally about demographic characteristics. If you are interested in the specifics, if you really need standard deviations, let me know. I can send you a reference that talks about these specifically. But the mean age of parents was 42. Over half reported living in a rural residence. Across the 2 years, 63% were male, 97% were married, and 69% reported that they were the primary operator on the farm, as opposed to like a secondary operator or a farm spouse in a non-operating role. We look at farm adolescents. Again, the sample was approximately 15.5 years old. Again, almost 70% were male. 58% reported participating in farm work, which is a little bit lower than I was expecting. I think we've had some conversations around that in the Children's Center. And you can see here how, on the right side, how farm work varies between the school year and the non-school year. So we're reporting more hours per week on average during the non-school year than the school year. So working more on the farm during the summer and perhaps on breaks. So I'm going to spend some time looking at results related to parent and adolescent mental health. Here you can see we screened parents for depression, using the PHQ-9, which is a validated instrument to screen. We're not diagnosing symptoms of depression. And what we found from year one is that almost 60% of our sample met the criteria for at least mild symptoms of depression. And what's really interesting is how that distribution, though it's similar in total, and that again about 60% met the criteria, more than that, almost 80% met the criteria for mild symptoms of depression, and how the distribution changed from year 1 to 2, and how many more people we see meeting the criteria for mild and moderate, and how few people we saw meeting the criteria for none in year 2. Now, I want to remind everybody, this is not longitudinal data. So we're not saying individuals are moving within these distributions, but or within these severity categories, I should say. But we're seeing the distribution change in total. When we consider anxiety, we see very similar results. And this is not surprising because there's often a very strong correlation between anxiety and depression. But just like depression among farm parents, we see about 50% meeting the criteria for at least mild anxiety. And in year 2, we see, for whatever reason, more people meeting the criteria for mild and moderate than we observed in year 1, excuse me. When we move into farm youth, we administered the PHQ-A, which is very similar to the PHQ-9 that we use to screen for symptoms of depression among farm parents. It is modified a bit for adolescents. That's the A of the PHQ-A. But very similarly, you might be saying, like, all of these bar charts look the same. We agree. 60% in year 1 met the criteria for at least mild symptoms of depression. And in year 2, we saw more distribution in, again, mild and moderate. Now, in parents, we saw an inverse then with sort of moderately severe to severe, and that less adults in years 2 met the criteria for the more severe symptoms. However, you can see we don't see that same sort of trend among adolescents. When we look at farm youth anxiety, we screened for several different types of anxiety. Anxiety disorders among youth are quite common. And we have the ability to sort of pinpoint different types of anxiety disorders. And so here we used an instrument called the SCARED, S-C-A-R-D, A-R-E-D. But you can see regardless of year, the most common anxiety disorders were panic disorders, separation anxiety disorders, and school avoidance. We have given this a lot of thought when we think about adolescent anxiety. This survey, we administered these surveys during the summer of 2021 and 2022. And we know we were, as a country, sort of navigating COVID-19. A lot of people spent months or years perhaps in relatively small groups, whether it be family or very small community groups, if they were, following some COVID protocol. We wonder if that maybe hasn't contributed to what we might consider like an increase in separation anxieties disorders or school avoidant disorders. This would be something really interesting to watch over time, and we need to make better comparisons to some of the literature about the general population in regards to youth anxiety. All right, this is a big table. This is a correlation matrix of sort of the major tenets of the family stress model, but a few things I really want to highlight is that when we consider relationships that prove to be quite strong, the first is that we found debt to be highly correlated with parent depression or adult depression. And when we considered sort of the major economic indicators, that was the strongest relationship to mental health. We also examined a very strong association between parents' depressed mood and adolescents' depressed mood. And this is not new information necessarily, but it's not something we've observed in the farm population. We also see a very strong correlation between adolescent depressed mood and adolescent anxiety. As I mentioned a couple of slides ago, we typically see a pretty strong correlation between anxiety and depression. Thinking about sort of discussions and conclusions. So as I mentioned, the strongest economic measure that was associated with parents' depressed mood was debt. I think debt is a really interesting variable to consider because the way people perceive debt is quite different, I think. I've had conversations with my parents who have been in and out of debt as farmers. And most recently, I heard them talk, and my dad said, "We have debt." And my mother said, "I'm in debt." And it's nuanced and it's slight, but I think the idea that some people have debt and some people consider themselves in debt suggests sort of a relationship they have with that financial status, perhaps. As I mentioned, parents' depressed mood was highly associated with adolescent depressed mood as well as anxiety. we have a lot of trouble fitting this model or making this model sort of behave statistically. And a huge challenge we're having is our variable for income. And there's a couple of reasons for this, but I think it lends itself to an interesting conversation in that how challenging income is to assess in or among farm families. If you are a farmer and you've done taxes, like, you know, you don't get a W-2, you're not issued a W-2. You're not issued an offer letter every year from your employer for you to sign, agreeing on some sort of compensation. So to recall, income is not only challenging, one, but we also know that there are some systems in which income is not an indicator of economic health or wealth. And so I think that lends itself to thinking about how thankfully we have other indicators to talk about economic health. But I think in a lot of instances, we might rely on income. And I think it's really not necessarily the best indicator when we think about farming. And then finally, I want to mention, we can make comparisons to the general population with this information, but it's a tough bridge to build. In some cases, we're using similar instruments, but we're not necessarily surveying at the same time. We're comparing our results to the best available public health data. And like I said, in some cases, we're using the same instruments. The GAD7, PHQ-9 are very common, but in some cases, we have to make comparisons to other types of instruments. So moving forward, actually year 3, we're in the process of recruiting a non-farm comparison group. We'd like to be able to speak with more precision around comparisons between farm and non-farm families. So that's something we're really excited for. We know there's going to be some challenges with that, but it's something we're moving towards. So with that, I do want to mention we are recruiting. And so if you or your organization are willing to share our recruitment information, please contact me. We are not recruiting via social media right now. We've done that for 2 years. It's a tad problematic. There's a lot of sophisticated robots out there. But if you have an organization that you'd be willing to distribute information about, we can write up a little bit of a blurb. It sends participants or potential participants to this website where they can learn more about the study and click to start the enrollment process if they're interested. At this point, I'm really excited to turn things over to my friend and colleague, Jana Davidson. I've talked a little bit about some of the research that we have, but Jana and I have been working together for several years. And most recently, we've worked together on a project, which I'm going to let Jana describe, but really thinks about how do we prepare young people in rural and agricultural communities to manage and deal with stress before it becomes problematic. So I'm going to turn things over to you, Jana. Thank you.
Thank you, Josie. Always a pleasure to work with you. And again, I want to thank Paul Jones for inviting the offer for me to also participate today and share some of the things that Progressive Ag is working on. So as I bring up my screen, as Paul has already mentioned, my name is Jana Davidson. I am the program manager here at the Progressive Agriculture Foundation. Been on board now just a little over 9 years, but I've actually been part of the program for many years as a volunteer. So it's something very near and dear to my heart. So I think it's always nice to start with a little bit about who we are for those that are listening in today that may have not heard of the Progressive Agriculture Safety Day program. So we are actually run through the Progressive Agriculture Foundation. Those are the folks that kind of build that partnership and secure both funding and resources for us to be able to do what we do. We are recognized as the largest rural safety and health education program for children throughout North America. So that's something we take a lot of pride in. And we are a very, very small staff, but we work with thousands of volunteers each year. And I think that is the reason we got that distinction. So I really want to give a shout out to all of the folks that help make that possible. Our program has been around close to 30 years. And since our inception in 1995, we have reached millions of individuals. So our program is getting ready to surpass our 2 millionth participant, which is likely going to happen this year. But we know that we've reached thousands and thousands of others throughout North America at farm shows, conferences, and other events. One of the best things I think about our program is that we do have peer-reviewed curriculum and resources that are geared towards children ages 4 to 13 years of age. We also engage with older youth. So we have a lot of teens, especially those in 4-H and FFA, that are serving as presenters. So it's a great, not only leadership opportunity for them, but a way for them to also learn safety by repeating that message over and over again, and really influencing and role modeling to their peers. Our safety days are hosted annually. Again, I can't stress enough, by our volunteers. So each year we train about 400 to 500 individuals to serve as safety day coordinators. And those individuals go back to their communities and work with thousands of others to help make our program possible. So we've had up to, I think, 20,000 volunteers in a year be part of our program. And as you can see there, our mission is to provide the education, training, and resources to make farm, ranch, and rural life safer and healthier for all children and their communities. So I want to go back a few years. And so Dr. Rodolfi had mentioned us working on a project together. And we had been hearing for years, mental health, and especially that those affecting our farming and ranching communities. But at this time, no one was really talking a lot about youth, or we didn't feel like there was, I think resources in general were sparse, but we were like, where can we fit in here? How can we help? And, obviously being a program for youth, we thought, wow, let's see if we can come up with something, some curriculum, some resources to really help what's happening. So on September 27th of 2019, we actually hosted a roundtable in St. Paul, Minnesota, which we really focused on taking that closer look on mental health in our rural and farming communities. So the event was moderated by a good friend and a longtime advocate of our program and coordinator, Dr. Susan Jones from Western Kentucky University. And our panelists included Monica McConkey, Tom Peterson, Dr. Rodolfi, and also Emily Kreckelberg. So we had some folks that were in the area, but also those that were really working in mental health and could really help us pinpoint how we should move forward. So as you can see from the picture, some great discussions. This was a full day, and it probably could have went on several days, but we had some really great things come out of that. As you can see, a lot of writing on the back of the walls to really take notes. And in addition to those panelists, we also had many of the foundation staff present, as well as our partners like Farm Credit. So some of our key findings from the roundtable, just among children, some of those common stressors that we found, especially in our age group, that 4 to 13 years of age, school, obviously stress around homework, tests, grades, sometimes even starting a new school. Maybe you're transitioning from one school to another. Maybe you just moved. Maybe you're moving up from elementary to middle school. So those can always cause some stress. Relationships. This doesn't necessarily mean relationships between boyfriend and girlfriend, but just relationships among friends. We know that sometimes if your two friends are in a disagreement, you get pulled in, and everybody kind of wants you to pick sides, and that can be very stressful for our kids. Sports. I'm a sports mom, and I noticed that this is hard, especially now. I know when I was growing up, I don't want to date myself, but there was seasons for sports, right? Everybody had their own season. Now, sometimes sports go year round. There's a lot more travel ball. It's a lot more decision on, kids want to do multiple things, but do they have the time and the resources to do so? Parent expectations, peer pressure, bullying, social media. That's been very evident in recent years. The environment at home, what is going on at home? Or maybe their parents are divorced, going through a divorce, illnesses that could be of the parent, guardian, or other loved ones in their lives. And then I think also just making decisions and choices, trying to figure out who they are, what they believe, what they want to do, growing into an adult. And sometimes that can cause a lot of stress. Then this is all things that we discussed here in 2019 before the pandemic. But then COVID hit, and we saw a lot of additional changes, a lot of additional stressors enter. I had at the time an elementary school student and a middle school student, and I definitely saw how the pandemic affected their mental health. So I do like to call attention. There was a really good 60-minute segment last year on U.S. kids grappling with mental health crisis made worse by the pandemic. And it was very interesting because there was a lot of children that were featured that, were straight A students doing well, very involved in things, and then that just changed. They didn't adapt well to the online schooling environment, or the being home, and so it was a lot of stories right from children. So I encourage you to check that out. But that really, I think that's a whole layer that was added since our roundtable. Then there's also unique stressors to those that are living on farms and ranches. And those are things like, obviously, that our farming families deal with, like bad weather or natural disasters. If parents are affected, if they're, feeling the stress, it's going to trickle down to the children. Same with financial and the commodity prices, the long hours. Sometimes our farm children have more responsibilities. They're working on the farm at a younger age. There's always that pressure to complete a lot of tasks on time. It's all the families involved, lack of sleep. Sometimes you're working really late, have to get up and go right into school the next morning. Then there's also those negative interactions with those that have maybe a disconnect with farming, or a lack of appreciation of those that are working with the ag industry. We see that a lot, where children maybe have to come to defend their way of life to others. And we see that a lot more, where people put down the treatment of animals and other things. So it is the kids have to many times have to come to the defense. Then there's the pressure to carry on the farming tradition. Maybe if children, have plans to do something else after they leave after high school and they leave for college, but maybe the parents or the grandparents, that generation, is really wanting them to continue on that farming tradition. So that can add some stress. And then finally, sometimes the inability to have extracurricular activities. This could be due to farm responsibilities. This could be due to your location. Maybe you're further away from where those activities are happening, and it's hard to get transportation to and from. So, and sometimes they miss out. Sometimes those farm related tasks come first. So that can also be a stressor. So with a major spotlight on farmer mental health, we started to see more resources being created, which was fantastic. But like I mentioned already, no one was really focusing on our farmer and rural youth. So that's where we stepped in. And up until this point, I would say the Progressive Agriculture Safety Day program really had a strong emphasis on safety. We do have topics that are related to health, but we were not really focused on that as much as we could be. So this was just a good learning experience for us, maybe more preventative measures too for the children. We are getting them at a younger age. So what can we do to kind of start some healthier behaviors from a young age? And so that's when we decided, what can we do? And we came up with curriculum with demonstrations and activities that are hands-on, engaging, age-appropriate, and of course, fun. We had to include that. So that's really what we did. So here's a look at what the curriculum looks like. So I put on here the table of contents. So you can see we have several different hands-on activities and demonstrations for the children to partake in, and it is done in such a friendly manner. So if someone doesn't feel like an expert, I am not an expert in mental health, but it's something where you can do it in a fun way, in a way that's not going to be too intimidating for both the children and the presenter. And here's a few things that our curriculum focused on, is having kids understand what stress is and their emotions. Many times we throw the word stress around, but do children really know what it is? So that kind of define that a little bit more and talk about what it is and how their emotions play into that. We try to make that connection between mental health and physical health and really break down that stigma. We identify coping strategies. So what should you do when you feel stressed, and how that can be different for everyone. There's always different things that we like to do. There's no one size fits all, but you need to find what's right for you and practice self-care. And then gathering and sharing additional resources. So at our program, we always send children home with a take-home bag, and we like to put as many resources in those bags so the kids can go and tell the parents what they did. And also there's resources for the parents to continue that lesson beyond the safety day. So here's just a snapshot of what some of these hands-on activities and demonstrations look like. Because I'm a visual person, so I can put it in words, but it's nice to see photos. So this photo down here in the bottom corner, this is actually from my Progressive Agriculture Safety Day last year. I will be having my safety day tomorrow, so gearing up for that. But this is actually my daughter, my oldest daughter, who's now a senior in high school, and my nephew, and they were teaching the activity on juggling stressors. So the children all were able to kind of share on a balloon. We blew up balloons. They all wrote just one word that describes something that might bring them stress, make them feel sad. And then we asked them to juggle that stress in the air. And then we started to add to that. We'd add another balloon for them to kind of keep in the air, and then a third one. And so after, I'd say the second or third one, those kids had a hard time keeping all those stressors. So we can handle stress in small amounts, but when it gets a little overwhelming, the point is that we need to ask for help. So they would ask a friend to come over and help them. Maybe it's a child tackling or helping take care of your chores while you're studying for a major exam. Maybe it's just lending a listening ear to a friend who's going through something. So it's a really good way, a visual teachable moment for these children. And as you can see there on the table, she also brought stress balls. She brought a variety of different stress balls. All the kids went home with a stress ball, but she had the kids come up and pick a stress ball that spoke to them and talk to them about what it was for. And then she encouraged them to find something, a coping strategy that spoke to them, just like that stress ball did. Why they picked that musical instrument or the farm animal or the sports ball. What speaks to them is what they can use as a coping strategy. So she did a fantastic job. It was neat to see that come full circle and have her participating in the program. Both of my daughters are featured in the top photo. This is, again, a photo we took during COVID when we tried to put out some video resources when folks were at home and we still wanted to educate. My children are actually putting together a stress ball. So we talked about the importance of the coping strategy in a stress ball. One way to really have ownership in it is to create your own. So I think my children in this photo are using rice. They're using the top of a water bottle as a funnel, and then they're going to create their own stress ball, again, as a coping strategy. So these are just 2 of the 8 activities that we have in there that really teach us from an early age to adopt these healthier practices for our mental health. Just as a parent, and these are some things that came out of the roundtable, and Monica, who I know is on the call today, she actually was instrumental in sharing a lot of these, and I wanted to share some of them with you. A few small acts can really make a big difference in a child's life. So they said there's 9 minutes of meaningful moments for a child each day, and that's the first 3 minutes when they get up in the morning, the 3 minutes when they either get home from school or you get home from work that you interact with them, and then 3 minutes before they go to bed. So again, just keep that in mind. Make sure that we are, talking to our children, listening, before you react, just listen to some of the things going on. I'm very blessed. I have a good relationship with my daughters that they are able to tell me things. And, sometimes you do want to react, but just listen and make them feel comfortable talking to you. The other thing, this is, I think, something that was shared, the peach in the pit. So sharing your highs and lows of the day. So this is a practice I actually started with my children after the roundtable, and, just ask them something positive that happened to them during the day and something that they could have lived without, or something that they wish didn't happen. And it was, at the beginning, they struggled a little bit, but they actually look forward to me asking. That one day I forgot to ask, and they were like, "Mom, you never asked us about the peach and pit of our day," which was just really nice because it really showed that there was something positive or significant. You look for the good things that also happened in the day. Yeah, there was something that we could have done without, but there was something, seeing that bright spot in the day. And then I already mentioned that listening and building trust. And then the other big part for us as adults is role modeling. I talk about this all the time, whether I'm talking about any safety or health topic. Our children are learning from us, whether we're a parent, an aunt, an uncle, grandparent. We are our child's first teachers. So, we need to be practicing taking care of our mental health and our mental well-being. So practice self-care. Don't feel like you're being selfish. We all need it. Adopt a coping strategy yourself. I would say to be kind. We never know what each other is going through. It's good to take a social media break. If our children see us on our phone, on our tablet, on our computer all the time, they're going to adopt some of those bad habits as well. So sometimes maybe put that phone away. I'm hearing a lot of schools now that are telling the children keep the phone in the locker, and it's been very positive. Kids, again, the first couple of days are hard, but after a while, they kind of look forward to that. A good break from technology. They're more focused. They're more attentive in class. So I see a lot of parents putting that rule in too about before bedtime, taking a break from that before you go to bed. Also, just like I mentioned in one of the activities, we tell the kids to ask for help. We need to ask for help as well, and share your story. Talk about your mental health and the things that you have done for it. And I think sharing again helps to break down that stigma, and just get others to realize, hey, this is something that can happen to all of us, and all of us can experience. So it really does take a village. I want to give many thanks to all of these partners and supporters that have helped us, from Farm Credit, who really helped us get this roundtable together, to one of the Ag NIOSH centers, CS Cash out of Omaha, Nebraska. They actually gave us some grant funding to actually put together the curriculum, and also some videos and other resources. And then also the North Central Farm and Ranch Assistance Center. So I've really enjoyed working with Dr. Rudolphi and her team, and then all the folks that she was able to bring to the table to really share resources, share stories, and continue to really spotlight this important issue. I just want to mention a couple free resources that we have, and I will, when I'm done presenting, I will share this in the chat, the links to these. But last week, it was National Farm Safety and Health Week. We did welcome Matthew Crutchman. He is from Pennsylvania State University. He's a 4-H youth development educator, and he talked about enhancing youth resilience. So I do have that recording I will share with you if that's something that you would be interested in, but please take advantage of that. And then a few years back during National Farm Safety and Health Week, when it was during the pandemic, when we weren't able to do as much, we did a reading of a children's book, When I Feel Sad, followed by an interview with the author, Cornelia Maud Spellman. And it's really neat because she's been the author of several books, The Way I Feel books. And so it was a really good story to take a deeper dive into youth mental wellness. So I will share those. And then, of course, the North Central Farm and Ranch Assistance Center has some amazing resources. So I would always encourage you to check that out. Finally, if you're listening and you're thinking the Progressive Agriculture Safety Day program is something that you would want to get involved with, or something that you would want to bring to your community, you can always learn more about us at progressiveag.org. You can visit, if you go to our website, we do have a Get Involved section, and right on there you can submit an interest form if you would like to bring a safety day to your community, and we'll follow up with the next steps. There is also an interest form if you're interested in volunteering at a safety day. We will essentially play matchmaker and find you a safety day that's nearby that you can volunteer with. Our safety days are really unique. We actually have 3 delivery modes right now. We're adding a 4th, as you can see. So we have our community-based, which is the original, where you can really educate children of all ages and sometimes the entire family. School-based, which is our most popular. I think 80 to 85% of our safety days are school-based. You can actually focus on a specific grade or grades. That's what I utilize here in my community. We have classroom-based, so if there's a couple barriers there, maybe you're having trouble transporting children to a location, or there's just issues around moving the kids outside of the school, classroom-based, you can go right into the classroom. This is our newest, and it's a little different. We have a limited topic area. Mental well-being is one of them, but limited topic area, and instead of the children learning several topics during one day, you bring them one topic at a time. So you'll come in and make a visit. and then you might come back the following week, the following month, but it's a little bit more time to absorb one topic at a time. And then finally, Safety Zone is coming soon. This is if you want to piggyback with another event happening. This could be maybe a county fair, festival, farm show, and you want to do a safety day on a smaller scale. The Safety Zone will be for you. So the mental well-being and stress management curriculum is just one of more than 30 topics that we have as part of our program. So you can really, customize it to meet the needs of your community. So without any further ado, I'm just going to close this out. And I know there's going to be some time for questions, but there is my contact information. Please do not hesitate to reach out to me if you have any additional questions or you want to learn about getting involved with our program. So thank you again.
Well, thank you, Jana and Josie, for that valuable information. We appreciate hearing about both research and some of the outreach opportunities that are available for working with younger people and in regard to stress. We do have some time for questions, and I'm again putting the evaluation link. If you would please take a moment before you leave today to click on that. If you have questions you'd like to ask verbally, again, feel free to use the raise hand icon, and we'll be glad to try to unmute you. Just a couple questions to start out with. There's a lot of talk, of course, about stigma in regard to mental health and stress issues. Any sense of whether that stigma is any different with youth, or is it as strong as it is with adults? Is there any change that you can sense happening in that area?
I can start. I think we do see young people being more open to talking about mental health, about talking about, what is depression, what is anxiety, what is stress. They do a nice job of sort of normalizing mental health in general. I think the challenge is that in some families, if parents have a relatively stigmatizing attitude towards mental health, like anything, youth are going to maybe absorb that. So I think it's really important that we as community work to continue to destigmatize topics like stress, mental health, anxiety. But I think, Jana, having worked with youth in this space, you might have some really interesting commentary on how they talk about stress and mental health and how they react to your modules.
Yeah, and I do agree. I think that I feel like over the years it has gotten better as far as breaking the stigma. I think children, as Josie already said, I think children are wanting to talk more and wanting to share more. And that's why I think also at our programs, at our safety day programs, or even programs that you are going to have, I mentioned our curriculum is written in such a way that anyone can take it and run with it and lead with it, whether it's a teen or an adult. But I also think you need to have those additional resources, because children do like to share, that if you do feel that they need to seek additional guidance or talk further, that you have those resources instead of just like listening to them and moving on, that you're able to maybe either talk to a teacher, talk to someone else in their life and get them additional resources.
One other question: did you see any differences in either stressors or coping between teenagers and like elementary school children? Have you been able to sense any differences or similarities there?
So from our research perspective, we have a relatively narrow scope in terms of age for our adolescents. So we're looking at 13 to 17. We haven't had enough observations to be able to look at smaller age categories or more narrow age categories. Hopefully, once we have like 3 and maybe 4 years of data, we'll be able to look at like young adolescents versus older adolescents. And again, I would ask Jana sort of what the reception is across the age groups that you're working with.
Yeah, so great question. So that one activity that I talked about, the juggling stressors, I have offered that personally to younger youth, elementary level, and you will see their common stressors are things like school and sometimes sports and friendships and things like that. But we actually offered this at, I believe it was the 4-H Ignite Summit that was held in March in Washington, D.C. So I was utilizing this with a lot of teens, and they had many different stressors. I mean, some mentioned racism. We had a lot of the expectations from parents and teachers, and maybe expectations of someone wanting them to go one direction when they were really feeling compelled to do something else. Maybe that had a lot to do with them planning to go to college and wanting to maybe pursue a degree, and maybe mom and dad are saying, what about this path? So kind of making those decisions. And they were starting to get into the financials too. They were starting to stress about college and who's going to pay for it, and will I come out with a lot of debt? And so there you saw a major change from those two groups. But this just shows that this activity is important, and it's something you can really utilize with all ages.
I will say that I love that activity. I think we first kind of schemed it up at the Minneapolis event we had. I have used that across all ages. You ask people to write their stressors on a balloon, and you get somebody to stand up and sort of try to keep all these balloons in the air. And it just demonstrates how impossible it is to manage stress when we have pressures coming from all these different directions. And I think it really, to have people watch their peer or themselves be challenged in that situation physically and trying to keep these balloons afloat is just a really interesting visual. And I think it really just normalizes the stress experience, and thinking like, of course, no one's designed to manage all of this. So if you needed great stress activity or something to demonstrate, the many stressors in the world, that's a great one.
Okay, we do have a couple comments. One just saying great work and excited to see farm youth being included in these discussions. Another one, thank you for the useful information. I believe that every effort to support children and teens in expressing themselves and asking for help is a huge leap in breaking down the stigma around mental health. Appreciate those comments. I was also asked to mention another resource. Oops, it's wrong thing. I'm going to put it in the chat here for you from one of our Purdue programs, Gearing Up. For safety program, they also have a module on stress that I was asked to make sure people were aware about. You can check that out if you like. I'm not seeing other questions at this point. Check again. Oh, here's another one. Just came in from Melissa. Can you tell us where we can find a good resource that can be printed and shared at outreach events about youth mental health?
So I'm going to drop in the chat our North Central Farm and Ranch Stress Assistance Center website, farmstress.org. There are a couple of one-pagers on there that are specific to youth. One that comes top of mind, I'm hopeful that it's still on that website. The Upper Midwest Ag Safety and Health Center developed half-pagers that talk specifically about youth stress. So if it's not on our website, consider looking on UMASH's website, which is what their acronym is, but it's the Upper Midwest. I'm also putting this in the chat. Center for Agricultural Safety and Health, and they are at the University of Minnesota. And if you need something specific, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to put my email in there also. We have a network, dense network in the North Central region, and we have connections to regional leads in the other parts of the country that are doing this USDA funded work. So we'd love to connect you all, e-connect, or help you find what you're looking for.
Okay, we've got both Josie's and Jana's emails in that chat at this point. And I'm just checking for other questions before we wrap up. I don't see any at this point. So I just want to say thank you again to both Jana and Josie for presenting today, and also for all our participants. You can feel free to contact them through their emails there, and Also, feel free to check back with AgrAbility. If you have other questions, we can pass on for you. So with that, I just say thank you again, and we wish you a good rest of the day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all.